Yeah, I'm gonna wear the guy's green earth piece with the cross to go with the Spanish Inquisition. So, Spanish Inquisition, Cecil Roth. Let's go in. Alright. It is frequently stated that and generally believed that the principal object of the existence of the Inquisition was to burn Jews. Strictly speaking, this is completely untrue. It is almost possible, though not quite, to go to the other extreme and to say that the Inquisition never burned a Jew. For the object of the Inquisition was to deal with heretics within the church, that is to say, persons who had been baptized or who asserted that they were Christians, but departed from the practice and teaching of Roman Catholicism. Normally, then, professing Jews did not come into the scope of its activities, unless they had been guilty of interfering with the faith of some baptized person, and thus favoring heresy, or were dogmatizers who preached it. Accordingly, as has been seen at the outset of the Holy Office, proceeded against a few rabbis and others on a charge of proselytization among their baptized kinsmen, or conniving in their return to the Jewish fold. Okay. As we have seen, an overzealous regard for personal cleanliness at inconvenient times, or changing linen on Saturday, or a distaste for pork was often sufficient to bring about a person's arrest, and with recourse to torture, the worst might follow. The reader will recall Lawrence Stern's story of Corporal Trim's brother Tom, who wooed and wed the widow of a prosperous sausage maker. After the wedding, they were both dragged out of bed and hauled before the Inquisition. It would never have happened, according to the corporal, if they had but put pork into their sausages. Those who persisted in refusal were kept immured until the time limit set for their expulsion from the country had elapsed, when they were informed that through their failure to comply with the terms of the edict of expulsion they had forfeited their liberty, which could be regained only at the price of baptism. This menace broke down the resistance of a majority of the survivors, and they permitted themselves to be escorted in droves to the churches. Others who were more obstinate were dragged to the font by brute force or tortured until they gave their consent. On September 20th, 1540, an act of faith was held at Lisbon. The first of a... Hold on, let me read that part. That's important. Okay. In 1536, the Emperor Charles V, King of Spain, arrived in Rome fresh from his triumph over the Muslims in Tunis, and threw the weight of his authority into the scale against them. And on May 23rd, 1536, a brief was issued, repealing the previous bulls and confirming the establishment in Portugal of an Inquisition on the Spanish model. On September 20th, 1540, an act of faith was held at Lisbon, the first of a long and gruesome series, which was to continue until the second half of the 18th century. Henceforth, in Portugal as in Spain, the pure skies were defiled at frequent intervals by the smoke which went up amid the popular jubilation from the queimaderos. The smell of roasting human flesh became familiar, and the shrieks of dying heretics sounded as sweet music in the ears of blameless adherents of the church who celebrated the immolation with a public holiday. At the outset, 6 tribunals of the Inquisition were set up in Portugal, at Lisbon, Évora, Coimbra, Tomar, Lamego, and Oporto. The 3 last named were, however, discontinued before long as being superfluous through a contributory reason was the discovery of particularly gross irregularities and abuses, partly of a sexual nature, in their administration. Okay. A series of 4 public autos was held, at which 219 of them figured as penitents, but to the disappointment of the public there were no burnings. With a delicate consideration for the comfort of the ordinary population, it is which strikes the modern observer as being so fantastically incongruous. The site chosen by the Inquisitors was on the seashore, a couple of miles from the city, in order that the stench should cause no public inconvenience. The stench of the rotting humans. Okay. The followers of Islam had, of course, been numerous in the peninsula. Ever since Tariq's first incursion in 711 to the rock which still bears his name, when the Christian principalities of the northwest had begun the work of reconquest, the Mohammedans had been butchered as a matter of course in every captured town and village. Okay. When the great cities of the center and the south capitulated, it was generally on condition that the former inhabitants should be left to enjoy their property undisturbed. And throughout Spain, in every great city, by the side of the Judea, where the Jews lived and maintained their synagogue, there was the Moreria, where the Moors lived and maintained their mosque. Political considerations protected the Moors from any widespread wave of massacres, such as that which broke the pride of Spanish Jewry in 1391. There was in consequence in Spain no considerable body of crypto-Mohammedans to parallel the crypto-Jews, and when the Inquisition was set up in 1478, it was the latter exclusively that it occupied itself. Okay. A few years later, a campaign of proselytization, that's a big word. Proselytization is what it's saying. Proselytization. Okay. Began in the new province under the auspices of Cardinal Ximenes, later Inquisitor General. Alright, here after some success had been achieved by preliminary persuasions and threats, the expulsion of the Jews of 1492 was copied in 1502 in an edict of expulsion for the Muslims. Okay. They were permitted to take, okay, yeah, let me read all of that. It was in fact a misnomer, for the measure was intended to enforce not exile but baptism. All the children were detained and baptized in the hope that this would encourage their parents also to see the light of faith. Expatriation was made so difficult that many, even of the most zealous, had to remain in spite of themselves. They were permitted to take with them neither gold nor silver nor other prohibited articles. They were forbidden to take refuge in any Christian land or in Turkey or in Africa, and it was difficult to discover any other place of refuge within the normal man's reach. In fact, there was for the vast majority no possible alternative, and whole communities all over the kingdom formally embraced Christianity. In the kingdom of Aragon, there was no similar legislative measure, but the example of Granada was followed, and the Moorish population succumbed in the end to blandishments and threats. When in September 1525, Charles V claimed that no Mohammedan should remain in his kingdom, he merely gave formal sanction to what was already almost a fact. Spying and okay, let me see here. Serious stuff. Those who failed to take advantage of this opportunity were to be treated, on the other hand, with all the severity of which the Holy Office was capable, while any who confessed and then fell back again into error were to be treated as relapsed heretics. Spying and informing were encouraged, and abstinence from wine or pork, or the use of the traditional Moorish dances and songs at weddings, or above all the scrupulous regard for personal cleanliness, which distinguished these unbelievers henceforth, figured like the indications of observance of the law of Moses among the misdoings which might bring a man to his death. Henceforth, the practice of any Muslim rite in the ancient Moorish state was a crime punishable by death. Okay. With a needless callousness, moreover, the edict was published on January 1st, 1567. the anniversary of the surrender of Granada, when Ferdinand and Isabella had solemnly sworn to permit the practice of Islam in this new kingdom for all time. Okay. In April 1609, it was determined by the Council of State to banish all the Moriscos from the country, beginning with Valencia. It was not until 1615 that the process of deportation was completed. The number of the exiles has been estimated variously between 300,000 and 3 million. It probably lies somewhere much nearer the first of these figures. Okay. But this was no more. Okay, let me see here. To be sure, in April 1521, an order had been issued for the consecration of Lutheran books. But this was no more than was happening in England, and no Spanish sovereign had yet qualified for the title of Defender of the Faith. It was noticed that some of Egidio's sermons delivered in the cathedral were shaky on certain points of doctrine, such as the invocation of saints and the existence of purgatory. An Italian Protestant named Carlo de Cecil, bent on spreading the new doctrines, had been traveling about armed with heretical literature and making coverts over a wide area. King Philip II himself, just returned from Flanders, paid a visit to Valladolid in order to grace with its presence the second auto, at which the survivors of this dissenting conventicle were punished. In view of the especial solemnity of the occasion, the affluence of spectators was unusually great. A Flemish visitor estimated them at 200,000 persons. Let me read that again. As he passed the royal stand on his way to the brasero, he asked the king, as one caballero to another, how he could permit a gentleman to be treated with such indignity by a batch of friars. I myself would bring the faggots to burn my own son were he as perverse as you, replied Philip, and he meant it. There was a squabble for jurisdiction between the Holy Office and the Holy See, which at one time threatened to bring the Inquisition toppling down in ruins. In any case, it proved a warning to the Spanish hierarchy that a little learning was a dangerous thing, and that the Almighty had conferred the power of speech on man the better to dissemble injurious opinions. Okay, let me read that. It was in 1560 that he introduced the Inquisition, through, though not in its Spanish form, into his Flemish dominions. To cope with the menacing growth of the reform movement, the country was thereby thrown into a turmoil, and the problem of a rebellion became inextricably involved henceforth with that of heresy. The process of repression reached its climax under the Duke of Alva and his Council of Blood, which comprised one member who is reported, whenever he woke up from his judicial nap, to have called out automatically, "To the gallows, to the gallows." Ultimately, for economy of effort, a decree of the Inquisition, confirmed by royal proclamation, condemned all the inhabitants of the Netherlands to death as heretics, save for a few especially exempted persons, a total of some 3 million souls, the men being generally burned and the women buried alive. Fortunately, no opportunity offered for carrying this unspeakable brutality into effect, but the final results in those parts of the country where the Spaniards re-established their control were appalling. Alva is said to have boasted about 18,600 persons were executed during his period of rule, and 60,000 more were driven into exile into England alone. Let me see. For the Inquisition had not yet been set up formally in Mexico, as will be seen later on. They are indeed inscribed, for those who have eyes to read, on the map of the world, for the fact that Jamaica became a British possession was one immediate result of the display of stubbornness. Mysticism thus descended by imperceptible gradations into mere libertinism. Sensual priests sometimes exploited their position to manipulate vulgar sexual orgies. Moreover, from time to time, religious hysteria or a craving for notoriety, particularly among women, brought about a simulation of sanctity or of supernatural gifts, which sometimes attracted large bodies of credulous followers. In 1623, stern measures were taken at Seville in consequence of the discovery of indecent orgies caused by the teaching of a fashionable local priest named Fernando Mendez, whose congregation would strip naked after he had celebrated Mass and danced together with indecent vigor. Among the penances which he imposed on some of his female votaries was that of lifting their skirts and exposing themselves before him. The discovery from the Edict of Faith that these pleasurable occupations placed those involved within the power of the dreaded tribunal came as a great shock to many of the stylish ladies of the city, whose coaches sometimes blocked the way of the convent to which he had retired. Eugenia de la Torre, accused of similar libidinous orgies with her male adherents, who included more than one priest. Religious mania could at times express itself even more extravagantly. About the year 1730, a learned Portuguese priest, Father Antonio Hebre de Loureiro, was charged by the Inquisition with having proclaimed himself God and the second Redeemer of the human race, as well as with other sins against the principal articles of the Catholic faith. The deluded priest was savagely punished. He was sentenced to wear the San Benito and painted mitre in perpetuity, to be prevented from ever exercising the duties of his order, and to be secluded for all time without pardon in the prisons of the Holy Inquisition. But the priesthood of Seville, above all places, does not appear to have been conspicuously amenable to discipline and decorum. For a brief, Pope Urban VIII was required in 1642 to forbid them from smoking while celebrating Mass and from staining the altar cloths with tobacco. In 1731, for example, a group of Negro slaves was put on trial at Lisbon for making a pact with the demon, whom they recognized and worshipped as God. Alright. Finally, notwithstanding the protests of foreign powers, the Holy Office appointed commissioners to search ships which touched at Spanish ports to discover spiritual contraband, a procedure which, until a few years ago, would have made any modern government the world's laughingstock. One sympathizes, too, with the censor who in 1742 was given a copy of the works of the Shakespeare for his opinion. He could find nothing objectionable in them. He reported it is to be supposed that he could read English. I don't know why I highlighted that. One of the commonest of all the crimes punished by the Inquisition was that of alleging that fornication among the unmarried was no sin. Let me read that again. One of the commonest of all the crimes punished by the Inquisition was that of alleging that fornication